Alright guys, so yesterday Rockstar announced there's going to be a new GTA game. Now they didn't say it's going to be called GTA 6. They did say work is well underway, whatever that's supposed to mean. So in this video I'm going to speculate as to where the location is going to be for the new GTA game. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And here is a map showing all the open worlds of Rockstar games. Most of these are the GTA games, but we also have Bully, LA Noire, Red Dead 1 and 2. I've played most of these games. The only ones I haven't played are the original GTA games, the 2D top-down games, and also I didn't play Red Dead 2. So I did play Red Dead 1, LA Noire, Bully, and all the 3D GTA games. So here's a map comparison. Now I don't know how accurate this is. I think the San Andreas map should be a little bit bigger, but otherwise I think this is fairly accurate comparison of the map sizes. So you can see the progression of the GTA maps. They just get bigger and bigger. We had GTA 5 here, which was Los Santos here, and then we had a large country area of Blaine County up here and some of Los Santos County. So I think there are three big possibilities and one possibility which I think I'm going to rule out, or a few possibilities I'm going to rule out. So in my opinion, I think there are three really strong candidates for the location of the next GTA game. But first, I want to rule out a couple of places. So we see here we had GTA London. Now, that was the only game. I think there was 2 expansion packs of GTA London. This was the only GTA game that was not set in the US. So I think it's almost certain it's going to be based in the US. Now, there may be a caveat to that, but I'll get to that later. So I'm going to stick my head out and say it's going to be in the US. I'm not really sticking my head out that much. I think it's pretty obvious it's going to be in the US. So the question is, where in the US is it going to take place? So one place I want to kind of rule out right away is Los Santos and the surrounding areas, because that was obviously the previous game, GTA 5. So I don't think they're going to do the same place twice in a row. So I'm going to rule out Los Santos and the surrounding areas. Now, if you go back to San Andreas, we had Los Santos, San Fierro, which was San Francisco, and Las Venturas, which was Las Vegas. Of course, Los Santos is Los Angeles. I'm going to rule out San Fierro and Las Venturas as well. I think they're going to just move away from the West Coast, or at least the California, Nevada area. I don't think they're going to do the same area twice in a row. And in the San Andreas game, I mean, it was probably the most ambitious game. You had 3 cities and you had all this surrounding countryside area. So here's a map of San Andreas. And this one is touched up, so it looks pretty cool. There's Los Santos, the biggest city, LA. And then we had San Francisco, San Fierro, and Las Venturas. Now, I don't think they did a great job with San Fierro and Las Venturas. Now, obviously, they had limited technology at the time. I think they did a good job with Los Santos in this game. But overall, this was a really great game, a really ambitious, large map. And I just don't think they're going to go back to San Fierro and Las Venturas. So I'm going to rule out San Andreas completely, all the 3 cities, and of course the surrounding areas along with them. So I'm going to look at 3 distinct possibilities here. One possibility you have to consider is Liberty City. So Liberty City was in Grand Theft Auto 4, and it was also Grand Theft Auto 3. And looking at the Liberty City map for GTA 3, it looks really, really small now. Back when I played it, it seemed like way bigger than this. And of course, the games since then, the maps are bigger. So looking at this map, it just looks so small. And then we had the GTA 4 Liberty City map. Now it's way bigger than GTA 3. It's a very similar concept. Obviously, it's loosely based on New York City. I mean, you have the Statue of Happiness and Happiness Island. So obviously that mimics the Statue of Liberty. And you have a bunch of other buildings that look like the buildings in New York. You have Middle Park there, which was obviously based on Central Park. In GTA 3, you didn't really have those iconic buildings of New York City, but everybody kind of knew it was loosely based off New York City. And just comparing the maps here, GTA 4 with 3, you can see the GTA 4 map is just way, way bigger than 3. And Rockstar has their headquarters in New York City, so I'm sure they would love to go back to Liberty City and use the current generation capabilities to do Liberty City all over again. But I wonder if the GTA fans would rather something different. I don't know. I'd rather somewhere different. I wouldn't be too happy if they went back to Liberty City. I mean, I am very familiar with New York City, so it'd be cool in that sense for me, but I'd rather somewhere different. Which leads on to the next candidate, which is Vice City. Now, this is strongly rumored. There's a lot of rumors going around that Vice City will make a return. Vice City was my favorite GTA game, and a lot of people have the same opinion. You had the 80s time frame, and you had all that badass 80s music. Vice City resonated with a lot of people of a certain age who kind of grew up in the 80s like myself. But the problem with Vice City is I think that they don't want to go back to a time in the past. So if they do Vice City, I think it's going to be based in the present day, which is fine by me. And I think they could have some of that 80s nostalgia by having a couple of 80s radio stations and having like a classic rock radio station. So you can still have your 80s music and 80s feel to a certain extent, but then you have all the modern present day technology. You're going to have your GPS and your cell phones and all that kind of stuff. And they don't have to worry about putting stuff in that doesn't make sense, that wasn't invented back in whatever. Vice City was set in 1986. And so when you make a movie or video game, you have to take into consideration what technology wasn't around back then. Whatever location they're going to choose, it's going to be in the present day. That's my opinion. So of the places they've already done in GTA, I think Liberty City and Vice City are two very strong candidates. And I think definitely Los Santos is out. And I think San Fierro and Las Venturas, I'm probably going to rule those out too. Now, regarding Vice City, there was a rumor going around that it was going to be based in Vice City, but also a city based on Rio de Janeiro. So remember I said it's probably going to be in the US, but there might be a caveat. And this rumor, I don't think it's true. I think it's not going to happen. I think they're just going to have one map. It's just going to be one continuous map of a city and maybe surrounding areas. Which brings me to my next topic, which is it going to be just one large city, or is it going to be a city with surrounding areas? For the Liberty City games, it's always been just Liberty City. 3 and 4 was just Liberty City, no surrounding areas. Whereas for Los Santos / San Andreas, it's been the city and surrounding areas for GTA San Andreas and for GTA 5. If they do go back to Liberty City, will they have surrounding areas of Liberty City? In other words, New York City surrounding areas. So maybe Long Island, New Jersey. Now, this island here and the one in GTA 3, this is actually a representation of part of New Jersey. So New Jersey was kind of included as part of Liberty City. It's a very strong possibility they're going to do Liberty City and some surrounding areas like upstate New York. So maybe Liberty City and Liberty City State. And also at Vice City, it could be the state of Florida. And they might call Florida something else. Though it's worth pointing out that in Vice City, in at least one of the radio stations, Florida does get mentioned by name. Somebody talks about the state of Florida in GTA Vice City. But I don't think they'll pick, if they do a Florida state, they'll probably make up a different name. Which leaves open another possibility. They may have another city in Florida. So looking at the map of the US here, here's Florida. I think Orlando could be a possibility just because it has like a lot of recognizable landmarks and venues, like obviously Disney World, and you have Universal Studios in Orlando. So I think Orlando would be a pretty cool location. So you could have Miami and Orlando, and then you could have like surrounding areas, which would be Florida State. So here's a map of Vice City. Looking at this map again, just like in GTA 3, it looks really small today. And back when I played it, when I was younger, it just seemed a lot bigger than this. I mean, compare this to San Andreas. San Andreas was just huge. I mean, look at this. Like, Los Santos was probably bigger than the whole of Vice City. And Los Santos only took up a small percentage of the map here. And here's a map of GTA 5. You have Los Santos, which is a pretty decent sized city. Probably a little bit smaller than Liberty City in GTA 4. But then you have like this huge countryside area. You got this Blaine County. And then you have like the small town of Sandy Shores. and a few other interesting places. You got the Vinewood Hills and the Vinewood Hollywood sign. So now I want to talk about a place where I think is a huge possibility, a brand new place. Now going back to the map of the US here, I'm trying to see like what cities would make a good city open world in a video game, in a GTA game. Honestly, you kind of have to have a city with iconic landmarks and a certain feel and unique atmosphere and stuff. And if you look at contenders, if you look at Chicago, people from Chicago are gonna hate me for saying this, but in my opinion, Chicago is like the poor man's New York. It's got a very, very similar feel to New York City, especially downtown Chicago. It's got tons of skyscrapers just like New York City. It's got a lot of nice architecture, but I don't think it has that same unique feel that New York City has. And another possibility might be Texas. You got Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio. But again, I just don't know if these cities have that iconic feel that might be suited to the GTA game. Now you have cities here in the southeast. You got Charleston and Savannah. These are really nice cities with unique architecture. I don't think they'll be in the game. I don't think they're big and famous enough to be used in the game. Now I think a possibility could be New Orleans. New Orleans is a great city in terms of a unique atmosphere and feel, and it's got really cool architecture as well. But I don't think New Orleans is going to be the place. Looking at some other places, you've got Boston, Massachusetts, major historical city. You've got Philadelphia, another major historical city with unique architecture and a very important historical district. But I think of all the cities in the US, I think one really stands out as a huge contender. And that city is none other than Washington, D.C., the capital city. Washington, D.C. has major unique landmarks. It's got Capitol Hill, it's got the White House, it's got all the monuments. And I think it would be a great location for GTA. And you could have like some really cool storylines involving the federal government and politicians and the CIA, the FBI. And so I think Washington, D.C. is a huge contender. If they're going to try a new city, I think Washington, D.C. And I have a name for this. I'm calling it Weatherton, D.C. So they make up names, Liberty City and San Fierro, Los Santos, Vice City. So I'm coming up with Weatherton, D.C. It's not quite Washington, D.C., but it sounds kind of like Washington. It begins with the same letter. I think Weatherton, D.C. might be the next GTA game or whatever fake name they come up with for Washington, D.C. And maybe that's why they haven't said it's going to be called GTA 6. Because if they're coming up with a new city and if it's Washington, I think they're going to want to show off the fact that it's a brand new location rather than just calling it GTA 6 and people are like, oh, GTA 6, cool. Well, where is it? Is it going to be San Andreas again? Is it going to be Liberty City? Maybe it's going to be Vice City again. Coming up with the title name of whatever they call the city, I think it's a really good idea. Because it's just telling you straight out, this is a brand new location for the GTA series. This would be my number one choice. Even though I love Vice City and going back to Vice City would be awesome. Whether it's probably in the present day, that would be fine by me. But I think Washington, for me, would be my number one choice. Something new, something different. Maybe it would be just Washington City by itself or the DC area. Or you may also have parts of Maryland and Virginia. So you could have Virginia countryside, Maryland countryside. And so you could have like the major city of Washington in the center of the map. And then have like 2 or 3 counties surrounding it in Virginia and Maryland. There's huge potential with Washington, D.C. I think it would be a great location. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say this is going to be where it's going to be set. Because I haven't heard anybody mentioning Washington as a potential location. People are saying Vice City. And there's some gaming journalists who are saying they've heard rumors and maybe they have some sources within Rockstar saying they're going back to Vice City / Miami. But I'm going to stick my neck out here and say it's going to be Washington, or as I call it, Weatherton. Maybe it's going to be just one huge city, or maybe it's going to be like one like really large city and then a lot of countryside. I'd like to see some countryside again. Like having one huge city would be cool and all that, but I think a lot of people have just really loved the countryside of Blaine County and Los Santos County. And again with San Andreas, the same thing. So I definitely would like to see a major city along with surrounding areas. Now, some people, they're hoping for something like San Andreas again, where you have multiple cities. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it would be awesome if it did happen. I just think it's going to be, if I had to bet on it, I would say it's going to be more like the GTA 5 map. One large city and a decent surrounding area. So perhaps Weatherton, DC is going to be the place. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be Florida, Vice City and surrounding areas. Or maybe Liberty City and surrounding areas. We're just going to have to wait and see. Let me know in the comments what you think, guys. What do you think of my Washington, D.C. call here? Where would you like to see the next GTA game set? Be sure to hit the subscribe button, because if there's updates for this, I'll bring it to you as soon as I hear it. So that's it for now, guys. I'll see you guys later.